Hi. In the last episode of Hidden Secrets of Money, I spoke with Harry Dent about deflation and the reason that we both feel that it's absolutely inevitable. In the bonus feature, I talked with Harry about some of our differences, and he believes that it's going to be a long, drawn-out deflation. I believe it's going to be a very short-lived deflation, followed by potentially a hyperinflation. And the reason is something we're going to talk about in this episode, and it's velocity of currency. And that is all controlled by psychology. I'm very fond of saying that the economy is both psychological and psychological. It runs in waves and cycles, and those waves and cycles are very logical because of the psychology that's going on behind it, and that psychology controls the velocity of currency. Now, I like to teach through the looking glass of history, so I'm going to read you a little bit of my book because there's a perfect example of this in the Weimar hyperinflation. And after I'm done with the book, we're going to come back and we're going to look at some data so that you get a full understanding of what velocity of currency is and how it affects you. So, on page 16, we have, at the beginning of World War I, Germany went off the gold standard and suspended the right of its citizens to redeem their currency, the mark, for gold and silver. Like all wars, World War I was a war of and by the printing press. The number of marks in circulation in Germany quadrupled during the war. Prices, however, had not kept up with the inflation of the currency supply, so the effects of this inflation were not felt. The reason for this peculiar phenomenon was because in times of uncertainty, people tend to save every penny, and World War I was definitely a time of uncertainty. So even though the German government was pumping tons of currency into the system, no one was spending it, yet. But by war's end, confidence flooded back, along with the currency that had been on the sidelines, and the ravaging effects worked their way through the country as prices rose to catch up with the previous monetary inflation. Just before the end of the war, the exchange rate between gold and the mark was about 100 marks per ounce. But by 1920, it was fluctuating between 1,000 and 2,000 marks per ounce. Retail prices shortly followed suit, rising by 10 to 20 times. Anyone who still had the savings they had accumulated during the war was bewildered when they found it could only buy 10% or less of what it could just a year or two earlier. Then, all through the rest of 1920 and the first half of 1921, inflation slowed, and on the surface the future was beginning to look a little brighter. The economy was recovering, business and industrial production was up, but now there were war reparations to pay, so the government never stopped printing currency. In the summer of 1921, prices started rising again, and by July of 1922, prices had risen another 700%. This was the breaking point, and what broke was people's confidence in their economy and their currency. Having watched the purchasing power of their savings fall by 90% in 1919, they knew better this time around. They were smarter. They had been here before. All at once, the entire country's attitude toward currency changed. People knew that if they held on to their currency for any period of time, they'd get burned. The rising prices would wipe out their purchasing power. Suddenly, everybody started to spend their currency as soon as they got it. The currency had become a hot potato, and no one wanted to hang on to it for a second. Now, on the next page, I talk about the front page of the New York Times 1923, and I reference some information there. And I just happen to have a reprint of the front page of the New York Times from 1923. And there's an article here about the German hyperinflation. But what I find more interesting than that is the entire paper is this wonderful time capsule. And if you replaced the names and dates and names of countries and so on in most of these articles, it would all be pertinent today. You'd think that you were reading today's newspaper. But when it comes to this article on the German hyperinflation, it talks about these paper mills pumping out 45 billion marks per day Now, this is the February edition of the New York Times. By November, those paper mills were pumping out 500 quadrillion marks per day.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I intend, how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.